Okay, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We had a very interesting session with Mr. Fadnavis, and we'll now take our fireside chat forward with our next speaker, someone who has worn many hats in her illustrious career, all backed by a solid foundation of research and a vision for forward thought. Please welcome Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, Honorable Minister of State with independent charge for Commerce and Industry. May I also invite Mr. D.K. Khara, Managing Director, Associates and Subsidiaries at State Bank of India, to take this dialogue forward. Ms. Bhattacharya, may I also request you to please come on stage and present the traditional shawl and the green certificate to Ms. Sitharaman.
Good evening, ma'am. To take the agenda forward, I would say that it's my proud privilege to engage with you in this very interesting session, which we are having since today evening. We had speaker like Paul Krugman, who had given the international perspective. We had the Honorable Finance Minister also, who has given the perspective as far as India is concerned. It was followed by Mr. Fadnavis. It was more like a reflection of the collaborative federalism which is happening and how actually moving into the competitive federalism. The growth agenda remains incomplete unless and until we talk about the export in particular and how the industry is going to shape up. That is something which is engaging our concern. More than 25 years have gone for the first agenda of reforms, and we have seen significant improvement in as far as the growth in the industry is concerned, GDP growth is concerned. We have also seen that as far as the population is concerned, there is a significant improvement in the middle class in the economy. And also, when it comes to trade also, there is a significant improvement. Our reserves have improved significantly over the years. I think there are some of the positives, but in that context, we would like to hear from you, because over the period of time, as Professor Krugman rightly articulated, that it is a situation where practically the window is becoming narrower, because when it comes to the globalization, hyper-globalization, practically all the developed countries are actually looking at the ways and means how can they restrict the flow of trade from the developing economies. So that is one of the major concerns for developing economies like us, how to really take it forward, how to really address the concerns. On the one side, we have got challenges relating to employment. That, of course, we have seen that the government has taken some initiatives, Make in India being one of the major ones. That is something which actually is organizing the country in terms of responding to the employment-related situations. We have seen significant growth in IT and IT-related services when it comes to exports. But it is generally said that the services are not the one who actually create as much of employment as possibly the manufacturing, which helps in contributing to the employment. So in this backdrop, ma'am, how do you perceive the challenge, particularly for India? I think I would be very happy, and the whole House is probably looking forward to listen from you, that how are we addressing the challenge relating to the multilateral restrictions which we are facing in various countries. And actually we have seen that we are getting into more of bilateral trade agreements as against the multilateral agreements. Would like to hear your perspective on this subject, ma'am.
Good evening, and thank you first of all to SBI for giving me this opportunity to be with you all. Yes, the picture that you have projected is absolutely true. The challenges are not one or two. The challenges sometimes can be predicted. Most often you can't predict them. The challenges for trade, global trade, are definitely getting acute and sharper. There's no doubt about it. And as much as one has understood, and also people who are with you, the experts who are with you, who constantly observe and guide and help you to move forward, all of us recognize that no longer trade-related barriers, and I'm sure many of you all in the audience would know it, the trade barriers are no longer tariff barriers. Barriers are clearly based on standards, your phytosanitary, any technical standard is projected, and you're told to comply with it with what they would say a reasonable time, but they most often do have serious cost implications. And the situation is very, very dynamic. The number of standards, the number of requirements which you're expected to comply with are almost on a monthly basis if you look at the member countries of the WTO. Every country comes up with something, and that is notified through the WTO, and you have to immediately make sure the line ministries are in it, and the coordination between the ministries and the information trickle down to the actual exporter who does have to give a consideration about compliance will all have to happen rapidly. I was just on the way when we were coming here talking about, we are in Maharashtra, so I would certainly quote that example. Almost 7-8 years ago, there was a major attack on the grape exporters because of one kind of standard which was imposed. And the DGFT and the APEDA could not, or as it is claimed, could not reach down to the level of farmer exporter, the requirement which they had to comply with. So when the freight and the cargo reached those European destinations, they were all rejected. And it was hell let loose. And even today, that particular episode holds so much learning for us. And I've ensured that we are not going to lose out on learning from that experience. But that is a classic example of how trade restrictions are falling on us. And in a country where, thank God, we have digitized, we've moved on mobile connectivity, we are able to now send mobile information instantaneously to alert them to anything which is developing, and making sure that the local and regional offices which have to educate them on such compliances which are coming in new are also activated. But even then, there are several challenges.
Yeah, I think the role is very well laid out in terms of the, if at all we have to pursue the growth path, we probably need to address all these issues, and maybe at a faster pace than what we have been doing in the past. Absolutely. Of course, mobile phone has come very handy in this direction. Yes. And hopefully with the improvement in connectivity across the length and breadth, maybe we'll be in a position to reach out much better. I think I'll take you to the next question, which is essentially relating to some kind of a dissemination relating to agricultural practices, since we talked about the grape farmers and the plight of such grape farmers who got exposed to the international environment, and they probably learned it in a very harder way. I think over the period of time, we have seen that there is a whole lot of potential available for the organic farming and the organic produce being exported. And I think a lot of initiatives are being taken in that direction from the government. We also have got a situation likewise across the length and breadth of the country where a lot of organic food goes waste as well. It is duly appreciated, and efforts are being put in for creating the robust value chain in terms of the cold chains and stuff like that. My question here would be that very often when we go to the developed markets, there are issues relating to the FDA certifications and stuff like that. More so when we also examine in the context of the way standards are being laid out and the way standards are getting changed across. What will be your advice? What will be your prescription for the farmers and also for the state government, so that they are in a position to improve the lot of all such farmers who are getting into this activity.
You know, I'm glad that this is being discussed in this fora. Organic is an area in which India has just a lot of potential. And I'm glad to say that the Prime Minister is very passionately engaged in this. The issues which confront us when we deal with organic are certification to start with. Because when you're talking of an organic produce, I take an agrarian example. The soil should have been organically managed for at least 3 years is the minimum, 7 years is a happy maximum. You need to certify the land, and that authority which certifies cannot be any authority which has been given the powers or has been outsourced by the government. I'm talking of a situation where the end product would go to a global market, and when they're looking at what makes it organic, these are the stages which are looked at. So the first thing is the soil, has it been duly certified after due compliances, minimum of 3 years when the soil has been left with organic practices. Then you're looking at a second stage, whether the seed that is used for cultivation is an organically produced seed or not. That has to be certified. Then the practices after sowing, are they compliant with organic? Are the materials used in cultivation are certified organic, and so on? Again, a certification for the process of growing. Then the certification for the harvested produce. Its condition, is it well preserved? Is it well dried? There are no fumigation involved, which is not acceptable, and so on. So then after that, the packaging and the packaged material. So the staging will, the certification will have to be at various stages, all of which together give the value addition and the price that you desire. Now, the problem that most often states face, and which we face, when we want to source and identify such produce for export to a particular country which has openly desired such a product to come, is the patch of land in which it is grown is not sufficiently big enough. Leave the problem of scaling up, will I get the quantum I need? But that land is so close to another which does not practice organic methodology in cultivating. So the land may receive those pesticide residue, which will in turn affect your land. So there is a very complex chain of things which make up for what is going to be and what is not going to be organic. And in that, I'm so happy, and I'm sure all of you all know, I've been there to see it. Sikkim has done a splendid work. And therefore today, being convinced of that chain of certification which the state has done for itself, and also because many of the virgin lands in which cultivation is happening, the black cardamom, the large cardamom that it is, it's actually not black, but the large cardamom and also ginger that comes from there fetch fantastic price in international market. Similar is the experience slowly, but not yet of the level of Sikkim, is the Arunachal Pradesh and Nagaland belt, which is also growing such spices. Now, all over the country, you have extents of land where today a lot of people, new entrepreneurs who are not from agriculture families, who've gone back because they've got this passion for growing organic things. This is this one side. They're also looking at the extent, the contiguity for looking at how to make sure that this doubt doesn't come in the buyer's mind that the neighboring land is not up to organic production. This is one side of the story. The other is, at every stage of certification, EPEDA today, Agricultural Products Export Development Authority today, does certify the produce, does certify the process, but really we need to expand it. And I'm glad to say, on Prime Minister's suggestion, recently I've had a meeting with Agriculture Minister to ensure that we have a comprehensive, at every stage, internationally acceptable certification process introduced. So I hope by the end of this year, we will be able to say, yes, we should be able to stand up with confidence to say on certification, stage by stage, we will be able to give it. The plan is random selection of crops in different pieces of land may not help. There's no compulsion, but we want to look at it from the point of view of a crop. So if at one stretch a crop produced by different growers all comply to it, and because it's the same crop for each season, we will be able to have a complete mapping of the growers, and therefore certification will have its credibility. So lots of work is going on that. We realize that that's where the price is going to be, the realizable price will be remarkably different from a otherwise grown product.
That's true, ma'am. I think that is more like a, we have got a natural competitive advantage which we can possibly leverage to showcase where we have the potential. Just, I mean, whatever you have just indicated, does it mean that agricultural can be accorded the status of an industry? And also the other allied question would be relating to some kind of a cooperative farming to have the bigger size and ensure that, you know, the size of the farm is big enough so that the pesticides related issues and the quality of soil issues can be addressed well?
Well, I think to answer this question, I think we should first concede that in India, the land holding is fragmenting. It's becoming smaller and smaller. I'm not going to raise a question about the productivity because the figures which come from land actually show productivity per acre, even though the holdings are small, is no less. In fact, it is improving also. So that is the reality. And therefore, if we really are talking about scaling up for the sake of better organized mapping and also organized overseeing of organic growth, it's an issue we have to talk about. How is this consolidation going to happen? So that is one thing. The second is, independently of these, I would think agriculture should be declared an industry in this country. If so many people are dependent on it, and if it is today going to have to receive capital, and remember some of the policies that we opened up in FDI, we are talking about FDI can come in if you're talking about oil palms or plantation crops and so on. So if why not have money come in also to ensure that there's greater production in agriculture, it will help for national food security, and also agriculture is going to be one of the biggest components for our exports. And therefore, yes, I would be in favor of declaring it as an industry.
I think before I move forward, I request the audience, if they have any question, their questions are most welcome. Yeah, I get to see a few hands there.
Ma'am, good evening. Anshula Kant, CFO at SBI. You know, we heard Professor Krugman earlier this evening, and he mentioned that due to technological shifts and protectionism, the days of hyper-globalization are practically over. So my question to you is, do you think we should look more inwards for growth rather than spend so much time and energy for outwards exports?
Well, yes, outside, when you go out of India, you get this message loud and clear that hyper-globalization is what has caused a lot of turmoil, and that gets reflected in the way political decisions are being made, electoral decisions are being made, and there's no doubt about it. But about India, I think we are yet to reach the stage of hyper-globalization, and therefore the message from outside is maybe we are not wrong in not having rushed that far, but at the same time, globalization need not be an argument to say we also have to look inward. India is a huge market. We have a fantastic middle class which is now capable of demanding the kind of goods that they want. They have the purchasing power. So, and ironically, sometimes when I'm sitting across a negotiating table with countries which are wanting more market access, I see the very same goods which are produced in India exclusively for export market are the ones which are with a brand wanting to come back to India. Textiles, clothes, for instance. Many of the brands that we are looking for are actually made in Tirupur and places like that. So, in a way, I have no problems if they want to come here, because if there's a market for the particular brand, no issues. Maybe they can come as a niche market, because there's a desire here for people to buy. But that actually tells you something. that quality, branded, good, globally recognized brands do have a market in India, and if that can be capitalized by our own manufacturers, instead of going through this circuitous route, that's for the high end. For the middle and the low end, the bulk of goods which come from any of our neighboring countries, particularly from China, many of them address our market or our demand for certain regularly, repeatedly demanded goods, our day-to-day consumption goods. If China finds it economically worthy to capture this bulk market, why wouldn't our producers themselves do it? So I would think, not just for the hyper-globalization argument, but for the fact that the unattended big potential of domestic market will also have to be served because it's big. Now with the GST, you have no grievance to say multiple taxes, poor logistics. Logistics is also getting improved. So we should look at Indian market also.
I think, yeah.
Sorry, are my answers too long? I don't want to be giving a lecture.
No, it's okay, ma'am. Perfectly fine.
Just a couple of questions, ma'am. One is that taking forward the agriculture thing, when we travel abroad, like for example, recently in Australia, there was a huge export of mangoes from India, and because of the demand there. But the retailers, the local retailers, Woolworths or Coles or whoever it is, were not accepting that. And it was basically being marketed through the Indian stores or something like that. And when I inquired, the problem was that there is no arrangement between the governments in terms of trying to have an organized trade on such things. So I would imagine that in bilateral, sort of negotiations on trade, such as these things could help a lot in terms of getting the goods across. That is one. Second question, ma'am, is in terms of when we talk about export of services, the only thing that we'll think of is the IT and ITES services. I think recently the Prime Minister in the Chartered Accountants meeting as well, he's talked about that one of the next big four coming from India. We have a huge, population who are good in other services as well. So is it not a area that we should be looking at? And since I think in the next maybe decade or so, the digital medium or probably be the globalized medium rather than the physical medium.
Yes, your example of mangoes, it's not so much the bilateral. We also go and conduct road shows in different countries, give the experience of tasting Indian mangoes, for instance, so with tea, so with coffee, so with many other produces. The gap, you're right in saying, the Indian stores readily catch on to it. And they have a niche market, buyers who come there and pick up, but that's not sufficient. Woolworths and other large chains will also have to be tapped. That gap, the nature of that gap varies from country to country. So if I were to adopt one particular methodology to get into all the retail chains in Australia, that doesn't hold good for Korea. So yes, we are trying to make that gap. Surprisingly, some of the developed countries also, which I thought in India, that practice which I'm about to tell you about, is very typical Indian, the socialist India's mindset, where you'll have a canalized body which will procure and then, then put it into the market. I thought that was typical of countries like India, which were, coming out of the post-colonial era, socialist in nature and so on. Advanced countries too. I take the example of Japan. Even they too have only 2 or 3 agencies, which are government-supported agencies, which are the only ones through which you can export. Post that, you really can't determine where is the last outlet to which your product goes. Once you've given them, it's up to them to, and the assumption is they don't agree to purchase from you till such a time they've done the networking. So it does vary from country to country. Yes, we have to do lots more on that. I agree. And on the services that you're talking about, no, we're not limiting ourselves to IT and IT-related services only. Again, I will give you the example. With every bilateral negotiation, we talk about our auditors, we talk about our lawyers, we talk about our nurses, we talk about the paramedics, everything. Numbers also are determined as to how much they can absorb, how much we can send. We, of course, can send a lot of people. How much can they absorb is also discussed. But protectionism, it's all part of the FTA, but they don't allow by stopping the mutual recognition agreement that we have to sign. You agree to a number, you agree to a process, you agree that after everything is done, this many number of nurses, for example, would go there. But the MRAs are never completed. So till the MRAs are not completed, you really can't. But the picture outside would be, oh, well, you've done an FTA, why aren't our nurses going out? The barrier.
Good evening, madam. When we talk proudly that SMEs are contributing 40% exports, and the last 3 years I didn't see the percentage increase from the SME sector. You know, when bankers and the government is putting efforts for the growth of SME sector in India, how you are promoted made in India, make in India, why not we can try made in India product manufactured by SMEs in the world by putting up special desk in our Indian SMEs. This is my suggestion. Because I approached more than 70 Indian the embassies. They said we do not have information from the central. So can you do one favor for us that setting up special desk in the commercial division, especially for SMEs for giving guidance to enter in that market, particularly for the export, as well as identifying the new technology. Because ITPOs last 3 years I didn't see that aggressively promoting Indian SMEs in the world. So this is my suggestion, if we can take initiative and give a relief to SMEs, not only compete in India, but to compete with the world market. Thank you.
I guess you're an SME yourself, are you? Or are you part of the bank? I have a different answer if you were this or that.
I am a SME Chamber of India founder and president. Also, I set up SME Export Promotion Council.
I'm with you. If you were to be with the banks, I would have said partly the fault lies with the banks too. Yes, it's a good idea to have a SME desk in the commercial division of every embassy, because that helps to focus and help in hand-holding to enter that market. I take that suggestion. I hope I can work on it. But I also feel in India, SMEs are treated, I'll have to search for a word because I'm not known for being too diplomatic. Stepmotherly, can I say? They needed to be, the SMEs will have to be treated a bit more favorably, not patronizingly, because I find most of them have done brilliantly well for themselves. But the cracking difference is where credit is not available to them. I'm not even talking of cheap credit. Even the expensive credit is not available to them in the form in which they would want. Their requirements are not similar to the large MNC's requirements. And if banks can have one little extra attention to them, if you're suggesting a desk in the embassies, I would want a desk in the banks. Do you understand the SME? Do you know the focus SMEs in this area? Do you know what kind of SMEs prevail here? Do you know what kind of problems they face? I'd like to have interviews with banks for that. Many of the SMEs clusters themselves say that it's not whining and whinging. Huh? They've made brilliantly for themselves. I'm repeating this. Hanover Messe, we had fantastic small and medium enterprises from areas like Aurangabad coming and displaying such fantastic things which SMEs are not known for. And many of the startups today have gone in partnership with many of the SMEs to give that little technological advantage also, and they are moving fast. But establishment in India will have to be moving faster for it, to be abreast of them. From the ministry, if you ask me, what have you done? If you're lecturing to the banks, have I done anything? Yes, I have done. Every MEIS that we had brought in, pre-GST, we had said certain HS codes for the larger companies, larger enterprises. But for SMEs, we said, you export anything, we give you MEIS. We've brought in that positive discrimination in favor of SMEs. And that's helped a lot of them to promote. And in fact, I'm sure you got all the data. Nearly 40% of all our engineering exports happen from the SMEs. That's not a small number. So yes, I'm with you.
Thank you.
Ma'am, on this particular piece, I think you are very right in saying this SMEs needs to be encouraged. I think it's a felt need in the economy and also with the bank also. And
Madam, good evening, madam. This is regarding Indian rupee exchange rate, which is getting, exports are getting impacted because of stronger rupee. I think 2 years back, we had a statement from Commerce Ministry, especially from you, that rupee is very quite strong and our exports are getting impacted. Why can't we devalue rupee? So now also again rupee has come back to 64 rupees, 64.50, 64.70 kind of a thing. And again we are seeing a decline in exports for the past 2 months. Our imports also increasing. Are they having any plans to suggest any kind of a devaluation or to keep rupee at elevated levels to increase exports? Thank you.
You've reminded me that I'm the Commerce Minister of the country and therefore I have to be extremely cautious here. Even 2 years before, whilst I commented on the strength of the rupee, I didn't utter the word devaluation. Because we are constantly reminded in government, rupee is all market determined. Don't talk about it. Rupee is market determined. And I guess the RBI comes into it only if extreme fluctuations happen. So for me to wish it this way or that way is not in our realm at all. So consciously, I don't talk about devaluation, although I do comment on the strength of the rupee. And whilst it gives a sense of pride that your rupee is getting very strong and it's good, it's competing while the global currencies are fluctuating, some crashing badly, rupee is not. But of course, it has its bearing in exports. Exports are going to face the brunt of a strong rupee, no doubt about it. So this is one school of thought where we calculate the performance of export also based on the strength of the rupee, and if rupee is slightly weaker, you perform better in exports. It's a common understanding, no disputes on that. But it's also a question of, will the rupee ever be as strong as, there are some senior citizens who would tell me, there was a time when rupee was almost near at par. There was a time, of course, 2 generations ago, people would have seen rupee being at par with the British pound. Not of the Brexit kind, but the pound of earlier. So there is this school of thought that you want a strong currency too. But it is a very difficult situation where exporters do have a problem. I recognize that.
Ma'am, you were saying something, please.
I just wanted to ask one question, ma'am. You are aware of this TREADS platform, where people who have receivables, they can put up their bills, the drawee accepts it, and on the basis of that, then it can be discounted. Whoever gives the best rate, they can immediately get the money. Now, this is a very good platform for the SMEs because it reduces their working capital cycle. Otherwise, what happens is getting payment of the bill, especially if it's a large corporate, becomes very difficult. And they are absolutely at the will and mercy of the large corporates. Now, in this area, is it not possible to mandate all government departments and all PSUs to mandatorily be on these platforms? Thereafter, you can also, do it for the private sector. But the government's departments and the PSUs are very large consumers and very large acceptors of items that are manufactured by SMEs. If this can be done, it would be a great relief for many of the SMEs.
I'll provoke you to send me a memorandum. No, not you.
Done.
You've heard it from the horse's mouth, so you should send a memorandum. So I've heard Chairman SBI say this. Do it.
Ma'am, yeah, please. Yeah. Sir.
Okay. Ma'am, I worked for some more than 30 years, 36 years in State Bank of India, and recently retired. And now I am devoting my full time in rural India for rural development, working with various foundations and all, and working with tribals for who are into agriculture, handicrafts and all. So one point which you mentioned was the division and subdivision of farm, which is coming into smaller, and then that is one reason for the agriculture is not going to improve and all. So something which I have seen in interior Madhya Pradesh, where I went on last Thursday, working with the tribals, and also in Netrang in Gujarat, where people who were displaced by the Narmada Dam, they have been rehabilitated and doing farm, is the fantastic work done by some trusts and also farmer producer organizations. This farmer producer organizations is a recent concept in the sense that they can be registered as companies and all. See, all the farmers, for example, in Madhya Pradesh, the place I went, 60,000 farmers are members of the farmer producer organization. The entire produce is purchased by the farmer producer organization, and basically it is sustainable agriculture, and every single farmer has got bank account. Very, very interesting. 60,000 in that small area, everybody has got bank account. All the payments are made through bank account. So it is totally digital in that area. And I saw the produce myself. It is purchased and it goes, some minor processing is done there, and then it goes into Bangalore for sale by the, these traders and other people in the online market. So my feeling is that a very strong push has to be given for setting up of farmer producer organizations. I think that will be the ultimate solution for the farmer not being able to get good price, and then they have to throw away the onion and whatever they are producing it, because they won't even able to get the transportation cost and all. This is one thing which I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say is about the fantastic result our Prime Minister's Fasal Bima Yojana has brought to the market. I remember we, the bankers, earlier were very strongly asking for the Fasal Bima Yojana, and our government has brought it, and it has made a total change in the sense that now the insurance products are being given on a very scientific basis, and I think it is almost a world-class insurance Fasal Bima has been now introduced in the country. One problem that is being faced now is that for the tribal farmers, very, very rural farmers and who are not touched by the banks, they are given loans by MFIs. So MFIs are now, even though they are regulated by RBI, they are outside the scheme. So we have to, the loans given by MFIs also should be brought into this by some, so this request also I wanted to make.
So you were saying something, sir?
Yeah, Madam Minister, one comment and then a question. My first comment is that you were fantastic as a BJP spokesperson, but you are even more impressive as a commerce minister. The question is, we've spoken about protectionism, and it's never been, the world has never been fractured on trade as we've seen over the recent past, particularly as we've seen what the new US administration, the president himself has taken a position there. The aggression with which China has sort of continued to be pushing its own agenda. India has come of age, and certainly sort of much more has a say in all global trade pacts. How do you see ourselves playing a more major role? Because where multilateral relationships and contracts are under stress, how do you see India playing a major role in defending its own interests, and at the same token being seen as participating in what is good global relationships that need to be established, and striking this fine balance?
That actually is the challenge. We are trying, on the one hand, to be a lot more dynamic in the multilateral fora. You've seen the finance minister really being active in the G20, the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperative into which we've just gone in. And on the whole in the WTO, we've always been seen as a country which can lead many of these groups, whether it is the group of LDCs, the African Union, or the G33 countries, and so on. That work goes on, not just the macro principle-related issues, but on many of these issues where trade negotiations just don't move forward. Multilateralism is seen as weakening, although we don't believe in it. We believe in multilateralism, but we don't believe in it weakening, because assertion in multilateralism is something which is seen as an old bogey. You have to bring in newer issues and so on. And many countries being led by India and many countries other than being led by India are all now standing up in these fora, and issues are being definitely taken up. But if you were to ask only about India, I would say we are constantly reminding and being at the head table to talk about these issues. And that is why I think in the absence of a trade facilitation agreement on services, we dared to ask for a discussion on it. I was glad that the paper was accepted. A legally vetted paper was submitted. I'm again now going in July, middle of July, even as the parliament starts, to be there in Geneva and to meet with all the groups to say, this year is going to be a year when a ministerial is going to happen again. It happens once in 2 years. We didn't see much of a progress in Nairobi. In fact, the way in which it was conducted ended up, I mean, even today, in the words of the DG himself, it could have been better. So we want to make sure that in Argentina this year, a forum like the WTO will actually address long pending issues and also address the newer concerns which are going on, which are such as the uncertainties which are coming up because of large countries, economically strong countries becoming assertive in favor of protectionism. And therefore, yes, there's a lot happening. We participate in all of them. In fact, we push very clearly for a lot more in multilateral fora. Bilateral agreements are also not being concluded. We are talking about it, we are reaching near finish, and we are waiting for that opportune moment to sign them. But even they are now becoming slower.
Ma'am, I think very interesting to know about all this, and also in an effort to really integrate our industry into export sector, of course, a lot of initiatives are being taken. But generally, it is seen that globally that all such units who are becoming part of the international global chain, they have got a potential of improving their exports significantly. Back home, we have got a situation where our auto manufacturers have done very well. They may or may not be part of, they are actually OEM, majority of them are OEMs. Any kind of a policy decision on this subject, ma'am, you are planning to have, and particularly to encourage the industrial units from the country to become part of the international global chains?
Maybe not in those specific terms, but yes, we are making sure that sectors which have already reached that kind of a international class in terms of the quality of produce that they make, and also the integration is possible. Yeah. We ensure that we bring both the sides together to see if that can be facilitated. Automobile is a classic example. We are looking at agricultural equipment also, where there is a demand for Indian components going for larger, big branded companies which are all over the world. Textiles, apparels and garments. Labor-intensive units are also now getting into this desire of wanting to identify with a global brand and therefore get into their value chains. So yes, we are doing encouragement, not so much subsidize them to link with them, but to subsidize them to be far more competitive and quality conscious. Get into standards, comply with standards, and then you'll find takers for your produce.
Yeah. I think the next idea which comes to my mind is pertaining to the startups. We have seen a lot of startups having come into the country, and your conviction into startup is also known. I've heard that you have invested from the MP Local Area Development Fund a sum of about more than 1 CR in a startup and in Mysuru. And that is a very clear reflection about your conviction into the startups. So any policy for startups to be encouraged so that they can eventually become part of the global networks, or they can actually scale up and can become a very integral part of the export initiatives of the country?
Yes, sure. This initiative that you referred to, where I've spent my MP lads, it was essentially because since I'm an MP from Karnataka, and I've been seeing Bangalore where it's really overserviced in terms of startups. I thought, and also because so many educational institutions, medical colleges, banks, that whole coastal area of Karnataka stood out as a place where there were a lot of qualified youngsters who were looking at, should I go off to Bangalore? So if I were to provide that facility, and it was really opportune and also very good that the local administration there also felt the need, and they provided me one of the best spaces available in the Mangalore city. It isn't in Mysore, it is in Mangalore. And therefore, giving the place and creating a 60-seater capacity for a co-workspace was important. But what I have done, which is yet to reach the fruition stage, even today there are teams working together with the Atal Innovation Mission in Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog, CPAM, which is the IP-related body which we have in our ministry, all of them have gone there, where I have sort of created a triangle connecting at the bottom 3 districts which come in the coastal Karnataka. I'm sure some of you all will know the area: Mangalore, Udupi, and Uttara Kannada, which is like south of Goa, north of Kerala. That entire belt. 3 districts, I have sort of drawn a flat line and said, I want at least 20 schools in each of these districts to be able to get the tinkering lab facility from Atal Innovation Mission. So those people have gone there to speak with the heads of schools to say, what is it that you have, what is it that we can give, and how best are you going to be able to give that advantage to the students. So that's my bottom of the triangle. Scaling up, I'm going over to colleges in these 3 districts where not tinkering lab, much bigger than that, much better facilitated, much better endowed than that, will be the second layer at the colleges. And post that, we've recognized that NIT, National Institute of Technology in Surathkal, and NITTE, which is in the same area, both of which are huge institutions, universities with all faculties, all kind of faculties in them, probably 10,000 odd students as innovation hubs. So if that triangle is activated, from school, you're going to have youngsters moving to college, youngsters moving over to institutions, innovation hubs at the university level, and many such triangles. If were to be fitted within a state, you create a greater momentum for the action plan which the Prime Minister launched on startups. Rather than spreading thin across the country saying, I'm helping schools here, I have an innovation hub there, I have something else in the colleges there, I thought if it is going to be a lot more concentrated within a state, the synergies would result in better outcomes. And if it is all available within your own ecosystem, within your own state, people don't have to migrate and then relate to situations which are not something which they can readily relate to. You want solutions for agriculture in your area. You want solutions for health in your area. You want to have people linked with institutions which are in far-flung areas. You can't suddenly get somebody from some other region and say, look, give me a solution here. If you can have the locals give the solutions, you can improve on them. So I wanted to have that guiding me, and therefore I did this. Seems to have caught up because the spirit behind this idea was recognized, and therefore Niti Aayog has sent its experts there, and I'm glad it's moving forward.
It's a very interesting pilot. I think if we can scale it up, it can actually transform the country in general, apart from many other things. Also, this is one initiative which I feel will lead to a lot of inclusive development, which is probably the need of the hour. And in that context, I think I'm seeing Navneet is asking some questions. Yeah, Navneet, please.
Well, a lot of mention has been made about Professor Cookman's side, and you also echoed that view, that end of hyper-globalization. But there is another much bigger challenge at hand, which is the changing face of manufacturing and services with artificial intelligence, robotics, 3D printing, machine learning, automation, digitalization. Several of our industries which are exporting today, both in goods and services, may have an existential threat. Unless there is a massive PPP, both the public and private sector invest very heavily into the R&D, will have a severe challenge in next few years. And a related question is, if Prime Minister's vision of digital India is becoming real, in few years' time, unless there is a sense of urgency and we do something today, our electronics import will be much larger than the petroleum goods and gold put together. So these two have to be a real big priority over the next couple of years.
I'm glad you asked the first question, and on that, post coming back from Davos, what I have done is just reviewed the industrial policy, manufacturing policy, and also today's, the startup, and asked the department to do an exercise, which is, I just go back to talking about the industrial policy, which was probably announced in 2009. Then you have the manufacturing policy, which was announced in 2011. And it sets you an agenda saying by 2022, we should have 25% contribution from the manufacturing sector into our GDP. Then you also have this thing about create employment for this many number of people, which is part of our party's manifesto, which is also looking at India becoming, India making much out of its demographic dividend. And there comes the Industrial Revolution 4.0, where you're talking about robotics, you're talking about artificial intelligence, you're talking about digital transformation, deep integration, Internet of Things, data mining, which is helping a lot of industries. How is that going to hit our objective on providing employment for this many number? And how are you going to, even if you skill them, how are you going to make India a manufacturing hub? Are you just dependent on the labor force and not looking at changes which are happening in Industrial Revolution 4? All of this was discussed. And to mark the 3rd anniversary of Make in India, we have started, not just now, but started as soon as I came back from Davos, the exercise of talking with industry to find out from them, big, small, medium, everybody, to find out from them how ready are they for 4.0. Are they really ready? If they're not ready, all right, are they partly ready? And if they're not partly ready, where are they? And what kind of jobs are they going to have to demand? And therefore, the skilling program of the government will also have to be meaningful, not keep readying manual labor, which is just going to be doing, say, semi-skilled jobs. So in order to have a reconciliation between all these, the exercise is now going on. Stakeholder consultations are being brought in. We have a knowledge partner who's advising us on it. We are putting together a complete picture of how this can be taken forward in the light of 4.0. And many, I would say, many of our states have really moved forward in taking IoT seriously, in making sure that their governance policies are all driven by, big data. And if all this is happening, industry, tell us how much are you ready to take on these kind of challenges? And therefore, the government policy, skilling, digital, all of them will have to be reintegrated, if anything. So the balancing or rebalancing is happening. We're talking with industry. Hopefully by September, the industrial policy, the manufacturing policy, and the startup together with Make in India will all come into the same page, and we will probably release it by September.
Yeah, I think one more question, ma'am.
So no issue.
Yeah.
We all know that Indian farmers, Indian agriculture has significant distress. And 15 50% GDP, 50% population, and the penury, and farm waivers, we all know is not going to be the eventual solution. So one of the core issues, the productivity of the farm sector, we all know that. Now, when we say productivity of farm sector, there are many factors to it. But one of the factors is, possible factors or solutions could be the genetically modified products that can come into a country. Now, from the experience elsewhere, we hear that the productivity of those farmers have gone up dramatically and they have become viable. Now, in India and also elsewhere, because of activists like Vandana Shiva and all that, who have actively campaigned against genetically modified products, it's kind of acquired a bad name, but it's scientific research does not necessarily prove it's a bad product. In fact, it's known to improve productivity. So what is our government's stand on genetically modified products? Are we allowing research? Are we encouraging it to come in? Are we able to deal with the ecosystem that is kind of revolting against it? Not all, but certainly some misinformation campaign going on. Can you just share with us what we think about it at the center?
Before I specifically address the genetically modified issue-based question, I want to tell you that agriculture today is on top priority of many states who have the potential to show that if they approached it all right, the output can also be improved and agriculture can see a greater growth and a better growth. And that's been proved. In fact, ironically, Madhya Pradesh proved it by showing consistent growth in agriculture over the last decade. And today also, the problem which happened in Madhya Pradesh, Mandsaur, is probably of a different nature rather than just the crisis in agriculture. So I'm not elaborating on it, but it is a truth that if you look at it, any crop, and that would be in different states, whether you're talking of oil seeds, whether you're talking of pulses, whether you're talking of the MSP supported wheat and rice. MSP also is available for many other, but we've normally confined it only for rice and wheat. Sugarcane, other plantation, areca nut, coffee, tea, all of them have had consistently good output. The fluctuation in the international market may tempt them to do less acreage this year or more acreage this year, but that is very much linked to this whole thing of India's economy being opened up. You can compare your prices with the international market and therefore keep moving. We are at a stage where the fluctuation is making farmers shift very quickly from one crop to another, given the land's compatibility for the crop. And that itself makes domestic prices also subject to such fluctuation, and which becomes a political issue. So we cannot forget this canvas. But with that said, on the genetically modified, I think we tried it out on cotton. You know, the attempt was made for brinjal, which didn't receive. In fact, the backlash was stronger. Government is not doing anything to obstruct the debate. Quite a few research, and that is one of the reasons why you had a domestically patented, genetically modified mustard proposition which has come up. It is not a MNC coming from somewhere to tell you, I've got a GM mustard, would you want to take it? It is a domestic option which has come in. So the issue is, were we against genetically modified crops? Because we are paying patent, we are dependent on an MNC, we are waiting for an MNC's improvement each time based on the issues which are coming. It has contained one particular pestilence, but it may not address the next one, so they are researching into it and coming with an improved version. Is it that? Or is it that we are against the genetical modification itself? Domestically, if scientists, after good investment from R&D labs within India, public funded or private funded, are coming up with genetical solution, modification solutions, are we for it or against? I think the debate is at a very, mature stage. Unless answers are given for these, and unless all of us arrive at a certain stage where we say we've heard about testing on human beings or others, about all the impacts which can happen to a GM product. We can't forever go on saying, not enough is given to me as a proof to say it has no impact on human beings. We need to draw a line somewhere. And we need to draw a line and then say, okay, I've heard both sides, then take a call, rather than protract the debate. So it is important to address these two. Are we against GM in principle, or are we against GM coming from outside? Is it the payment of royalty which is worrying us? Is it that we will mortgage our sovereignty on agriculture by being dependent on foreign GM producers? Or if it is going to be only on the principle of GM affecting human lives, affecting generations to come, questioning all the permutation and combination in your DNA itself, what amount of research will convince this way or that way? These are, I would think, the three critical questions which Indians will have to answer. All of us will have to answer.
Thank you, ma'am. Very clearly articulated the dynamics of the decision on such critical issues. I think with this, we come to end of this session. Thank you very much. And I think on behalf of State Bank of India, I am very thankful to you having come over, accepted our invitation, and have apprised your thoughts, which are very valuable to all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, SBI, for giving me this chance.
Thank you so much for that. May I request Ms. Bhattacharya to please come on stage and felicitate Ms. Sitharaman. Thank you so much. And as we wrap up day one of what has been a string of stimulating thoughts, allow me to invite Mr. B. Sriram, Managing Director, Corporate Banking Group, State Bank of India, for a vote of thanks.
Good evening, Professor Paul Krugman, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman, Honorable Minister of State, Independent Charge for Commerce and Industry, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It's a very difficult task for me to bring this fascinating evening to a close. The bad thing is, of course, that we have to close, but the good thing is that we start again tomorrow, we continue tomorrow. And I hope all of you will take some time out to be with us tomorrow as well. It is the 4th year that the State Bank of India has been organizing this conclave, the Banking and Economics Conclave. And for the last 3 years, we have had the benefit of the Honorable Finance Minister, who has blessed these conclaves with his inaugural address and inauguration of these conclaves. The first time when after the inauguration, or just before the inauguration, we got the insolvency and the bankruptcy code as a gift. This year, we have got the GST, which will formalize all economies as a gift. And actually, I would request the chairman to make it a half-yearly affair so that we have more frequent gifts as we go along. A very big and huge thank you to the Honorable Finance Minister, who, despite his punishing schedule, came and blessed us today and made his inaugural comments to the larger audience. The series of reforms that the government has been doing in the economic side as well as in the banking side was laid out very clearly by the Finance Minister. And of course, the benefits of the GST as well as the implementation hiccups that have been taken care of were clearly enunciated by him. The two things that broadly stood out as far as my reading of his speech was concerned was one, the huge consumer support, and the other, the huge public support for all the initiatives that the government of India has been doing. And that actually binds the political class, the analyst class, all the other sections of society to make our country a better country. The IBC and the GST are path-breaking events for a bank such as ours, as well as for the banking system. It creates not only a vehicle for redressal of some of these issues that the banking system is facing, but also it allows us to lend more by formalizing the economy, especially for the SMEs, as the Honorable Minister was saying. We need to do more for the SMEs, and I'm sure this will be one way forward. The BST is also the biggest tax reform that the country has embarked on, which will surely have a large expansion in tax base as well as buoyancy in tax collections, which would be very helpful as we go along. So very big thank you, sir. And I'm sure, as I said, next year we'll look forward to something bigger. Professor Paul Krugman, sir, thank you very much. Very short notice, you've accepted our invitation to be with us today. Some of the things that you addressed, one is, of course, in terms of the global trade as a percentage of the global GDP, and your ideas of that the global trade is likely to peter off for some time. I think these are some things that will be deliberated in our future panels that we have tomorrow. A couple of things which stood out, of course, as far as India is concerned. One is, of course, your views that growth is more important to India today, growing at 8–9%, than looking at some of these fiscal issues that the country is facing. I think that is a big lesson to us. Maybe we should look at it as well. Thank you very much for coming and being with us today. Of course, the Honorable Chief Minister of Maharashtra was here with vision for Maharashtra. 15% of the nation's GDP and about 17% of the industrial output of the country comes through Maharashtra. It's a very key state. And of course, the amount of the vision that he has and the dream that he has to make Maharashtra has come out very clearly in the way in which he explained the Mumbai-Nagpur Expressway, which will link 8 districts, and across 2 to 8 hours of journey will become that much more easier, not only for transportation, but also for businesses and economies that lie in the route of the Mumbai-Pune Expressway. His dream for Mumbai as well, and as well as larger issue of the agriculture problems that has been facing the state, as well as the initiatives that he's going to take in the area of irrigation. I think these are all things which will make Maharashtra a dream place to invest in. Already, FDI in Maharashtra is so much more than the other states. We all thank him for his presence here, and I'm sure, we being here in the state of Maharashtra, we'll have that much more interaction with him and on an ongoing basis. We thank you, ma'am, for your comments and for being here with us, and the amount of passion that you showed on the startup and the initiatives that you're taking in the 3 districts in Karnataka. I think that passion, as one of our guests did say, appeared to all of us in your role as Minister of Commerce and Industry. And I'm sure under your leadership, some of the things that the guests were able to hear you, face to face. I think these are some things that we surely will benefit from, both for the banking system as well as for the country at large. Thank you very much for being with us today. I would also like to thank all our distinguished guests today. Without you, the audience, I think none of these programs make any sense. I know it's tough for all of us to be here since 5 o'clock, and it's, I think, past 9. But you've made time for us. You've made time for SBI. Have made time for all of our panelists, all of our speakers. Thank you very much for being with us. I also thank other officials, members from the industry, or friends from the banking fraternity for their presence during this inaugural function. Last but not the least, I'd like to thank the members of the media for their interest in covering this event. We thank you all for being here, and let me invite you now to the last event of the day, that is dinner, and dinner is ready. Thank you very much.